Coming up on today's show, we get a different perspective on the Quinton Byfield Team Stutzle draft selections. We'll get some intel on Cam Talbot from last season and more as we're joined by Locked On Senators co-host Ross Levitan on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And, of course, we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20-plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and, of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 years. We are excited to be joined by the first time by a man who, along with the co-host Brandon Pillar, is doing a great job with the Locked On Senators podcast. He is also a radio blowhard like myself on 680 CJOB in Winnipeg. He is the great Ross Levitan. Hey, Ross, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Man, I got some family ties to LA too, so I've been lucky enough to get out to your coast, your beautiful city, a few times in my life, and always leave with a smile. So have a nice soft spot for the LA Kings too, and excited to chat with you, man. It's been a long time coming. Been watching the growth of the show over the last while, and it's a pleasure to be on with you.
Well, it's great to have you. And, if you ever get out this way, make sure you let me know. Be great to meet up and say hi. But you've been killing it over there on Locked On Senators. Congratulations on your success. You've had a lot of interviews with players. One of them we're going to talk about in a minute. But you've had GM Pierre Dorion on your show multiple times. So I have to ask you for some advice. How do I get Kings GM Rob Blake to come on my show?
Just be so annoying that finally they just like, okay, if they're gonna keep asking. No, funny enough, like we had asked once to have him on, and I just go through the PR team, don't want to take any back channels and kind of do them dirty. They've been really good to us overall, the Senators have. And it's interesting, I guess, to lead into it, like Ottawa is tucked in between the two biggest hockey markets in Canada, and Toronto and Montreal, like right geographically speaking, right in the middle. So they get overblown with the coverage. Our ESPN is called TSN. They cover, it's almost the joke is the Toronto Sports Network instead of right? They just cover them top to bottom. Austin Matthews sneezes, it's a half-hour story. Whereas Ottawa is the forgotten stepchild. It's also the youngest team. 2 original 6 teams. Ottawa came in 1992. So we've got a huge, passionate, diehard fan base here that's grown up with a team that won President's trophies, made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and really had a 10-year period of sustained success. Could never get it done to the Stanley Cup, but was a perennial playoff team. They made the playoffs 16 straight seasons. So I kind of grew up in that era, and a lot of other Sens fans did, but they never got the coverage. So I think that we've been able to kind of corner a market of really hungry fans who want to hear chirps to Toronto and Montreal, not kind of, cater to the larger population's needs. So I appreciate that. We have found a niche, but when it comes to Pierre Dorion, this is just boots on the ground, man. I was in Winnipeg, and where I'm living now in the last couple of years, I'm born and raised in Ottawa, but I was going to check out the Winnipeg Ice, their playoff game last year. They had a couple Sens prospects on the team, and anytime I can watch live hockey, I'm going to take it up on it. And I turn over my shoulder, and there's Pierre Dorion doing some scouting, and it's in the middle of May, a playoff series. So I went up, and we had just had his top goalie prospect, Mads Sogard, on the show. And I said, hey, man, like Mads looks ready. And he's like, hey, you look familiar. So I guess he had seen the show or a clip of it, whatever. And when we got back, he's like, yeah, I'd be happy to come on the show. So I messaged the Pierre, and this time I went in with a little ammo. I said, hey, I met Pierre. He said he'd come on the show. So instead of asking if we could get access to him, it was, hey, when can we work out this in his schedule? And then he had a good chat with us. I think he appreciated the way he has told us he appreciates the way we cover the team. A lot of people kind of pile on during this last little time where they haven't been able to get over the hump. We are fair, if not too fair, with how the Senators have done. So yeah, it all went well. And then we got to sit down with him when we went to Ottawa for development camp. So yeah, 3-time recurring guest, Pierre Dorion. Pressures on him, pressures on the coach, pressures on the team right now. It's an interesting time in Ottawa. And I didn't even realize the Korpisalo connection here too. It's almost like Ottawa and LA made somewhat of a trade despite being unrestricted free agents. But you guys get Cam Talbot, we get Jonas Korpisalo, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk to you about Cam Talbot here in just a little bit. And I guess I got to stake out Rob Blake at like whatever Starbucks he goes to or something like that to see if I can get him to come on this show. But we'll try it. We'll keep it going there. So it is funny that you think on the surface there's not much of a connection between Ottawa and LA, but the more I kind of thought about it, there are some pretty decent connections. But I do want to this quick story. So obviously the Senators didn't make the playoffs this past year, and you were looking for some fun content, and you reached out to the hosts of the teams that did make the playoffs, and you said, let's make a little funny video, see if you can get Senators fans to jump on your bandwagon. And so I did a video for you, and I tried to sell Ottawa fans on the possible Hollywood connection, right? Because at the time, the Senators were for sale, and one of the potential owners was the famous actor Ryan Reynolds. Now, unfortunately, that didn't happen, but how disappointed are you that Deadpool did not become the owner of the Senators? Because I think that would have been awesome.
Yeah, you know what? Original, like, knee-jerk reaction. It was like, oh, that's too bad. But we've got a good friend of the show. He goes by Atlalim's Martian, which is kind of a play on one of the famous goalies' helmets. He always had Marvin the Martian on his helmet. But he's got a few connections, and we kind of knew over the last 3 months that the leader was the only party of kind of the main 4 groups remaining that didn't have a celebrity. So we kind of had it in the back of our mind. Hey, look, there's a lot of play. They're trying to push it up $950 million. My goodness, Eddie, that's the most expensive NHL team of all time. We're talking about the Ottawa Senators here. We're not talking about Montreal, New York, Toronto, teams who have obviously the history and the bigger valuation. They just have never sold a majority share for that amount yet. But when you're talking about that kind of money, it's going to come down to who has the most like money around them as well. Like, you know, as Ryan Reynolds said so eloquently, his first time mentioning that he was interested, he needed a sugar daddy to make it happen for him. He needed someone with deep pockets. He decided, and this was where things got really interesting. He decided that he was going to go and attach himself with a group early in the process. Gary Bettman would have been thrilled to wait until the deciding victor majority owner was named and then have Ryan Reynolds almost like attached with it as a minority owner. But he said, look, I don't want to play as, you know, a winner. I don't want to be a bandwagon jumper, whoever gets on. He had a very specific idea of what he wanted this to look like. So he attached himself to a group, and ultimately they didn't win. Nico Sparks, an LA-based producer, was involved in the process throughout. His group kept adding celebrities as much as they could. They were like, hey, you. They had Snoop Dogg for a bit. Dragon's Den, which up here is the equivalent of Shark Tank for you guys down there. He had the entire panel join, and it's like he's the first guy to ever sell a product he didn't own to the Sharks. It was kind of impressive in a sense, but those groups didn't happen. And the other group, the Kimmel group, had The Weeknd involved, the singer The Weeknd, who's also Canadian. But yeah, Michael Andlauer gets the team. And yeah, initially you're like, okay, it's not the big name. You know, when Snoop Dogg put his name in the ring and Ryan Reynolds, they were on ESPN. First Take was talking about the Ottawa Senators of all teams. And, you know, us little small town Canadians are having a laugh at that for sure. But what really bubbles to the surface here with Michael Andlauer is all he cares about is hockey. He just wants to win. He wants to win hockey games, and I think that's resonating with the fans. The first thing he did was renovate the alumni suite at the arena. He wants the former Senators to come in and kind of build the tradition back, and a lot of people left. Like, we're kind of like shoved away by the former owner. Like, that's just being frank. Obviously, rest in peace. Eugene Melnyk passed away, saved the team from bankruptcy in 2003. But Eddie, like, some of the things this guy said in the media, you're like, shaking my head, threatening to move the team, you know, talking about how, you know, if you don't like the team, then just like, or this was a direct quote from him. They said, are you thinking about blowing up the team when things weren't going well? You know, rebuild. He said, anyone who thinks we should blow up the team should get a bomb and blow themselves up. Like, these are the type of things that he was saying, quote, like verbatim. And it really, there was a disconnect. There were banners that said Melnyk out. There were all sorts of things that were just going against what a team should be, bringing people together. So Yeah, initial kind of, oh shucks, no celebrity, but really I think Michael Andlauer is the right choice. He's been an owner in the league for a number of years, had a 10% share in the Montreal Canadiens. So he's selling that. So he's already got connections and relationships with other owners. So I think overall it's a good thing, but I can definitely see, especially from the outside, being like, oh, would have been great. And number one, like, come on, Welcome to Wrexham, that sort of documentary, I'd be all in on that.
Yeah, I heard that. I'm not even much of a soccer fan, but I enjoy watching that show. Yeah, that would be great to see something like that involving an NHL team. All right, Ross, hold on just 1 second. We are going to get into, in just a moment, a lot of talk from LA Kings fans about a certain player that was selected and a player that ended up going to the Ottawa Senators afterwards. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. But we'll get into that here in just a second on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, this episode of Locked On LA Kings brought to you by AG1. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you are absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. AG1 contains less than 1 gram of sugar, costs you less than $3 a day, and it's just one scoop in a cup of water. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Check it out. All right, we are back with Locked On Senators host Ross Levitan. Ross, let me take you back to 2020. Because of COVID, we had a virtual NHL draft. At the time, we knew the New York Rangers were going to take Alexis Lafreniere, number 1 overall. He was supposed to be great. He isn't, but that's the Rangers' problem. The draft started at number 2, as I remember them saying, and the LA Kings had the number 2 pick overall, and the Ottawa Senators were at number 3. So obviously there was the debate. I'm sure it was talked about in Ottawa as well. Who are the Kings going to take? Will it be the Canadian center Quinton Byfield or the German winger Tim Stutzle? Well, obviously the Kings took Quinton Byfield, and we'll discuss how that has or hasn't worked out. And so Tim Stutzle fell to the Ottawa Senators. That's worked out very well for you guys. Do you recall at the time what the discussion was as far as who the Senators were hoping the Kings would take and who would fall to Ottawa? Or was it just kind of like, it's out of our hands, regardless of what happens, we should get a pretty good player?
Yeah, it sounds like the decision was no decision. Whoever was left for them, it was going to be one of those two guys. And from conversations that I've had around the team, I'm pretty sure, and this is without 100% confirmation, but I'm comfortable enough saying they had Tim Stutzle number 2 on their list. And a couple people told me they may have had him 1, but I don't believe them. I think that's in history, a bit of revisionist history. Lafreniere was unbelievable his draft year. And like, I still think that there's a path forward for him to be a star in the league, but the Rangers and prospects, we could do a whole month of shows. And I'm sure John Chick is over at Locked On Rangers, but yeah, like I remember being like, okay, Byfield might be the edge to get here, especially because Ottawa had built a nice crop of wingers at that point. And like you said, when Stutzle was drafted, it's like, hey, is he probably going to end up on the wing? Yeah, maybe. Now he's like a no doubt center. Like Tim Stutzle hasn't played wing in over a year, and he's just not going to be a winger anymore. He's too dynamic, too good in the middle of the ice, too much vision and playmaking abilities, agility's off the charts, and he's even got a bit of snarl to him. Like I was blown away, especially this year, right when he turned 20, mostly the year before, but all year this year, like using his body, being physical, even getting into a bit of post whistle scrum. So he has a bit of juice that I didn't know he had to him. Whereas like Quinton Byfield, and this is where like, yeah, for a meme or two, maybe I'll have some fun with it, but I really do think that Quinton Byfield is going to be a heck of a player. Everyone knew it at the time that it was like, hey, he's probably going to need a couple of years. He's probably going to need a couple of years. And then the OHL not starting up again. Like, how much do you think, Eddie, that was a deterrent in his immediate progress? Because I think going to play against men, like that can't be easy when you're a late birthday as he is, he's late August birthday, one of the youngest players at the draft. I just feel like he really got missed out or done dirty by not being able to go back to that OHL the year after he was drafted.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons that have factored in to Quinton Byfield's development. I think it's also fair to say he hasn't come along as quickly as a lot of people would have wanted or hoped. But the Kings fans will say, oh, you're making excuses for him. Well, I mean, facts are facts. There have been injury issues and factors out of his hands, like you've talked about. And I agree with you. I really do think there's still time for him to develop. I talk about, hey, Adrian Kempe took 7 years before he became a 40 goal scorer, and you want to, hit the eject button on this guy after basically one full season of NHL play. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I get the impatience, but I kind of get from your thoughts. Well, I mean, let me just ask you, not put words in your mouth. If the Senators had the number 2 pick and you had the selection, who would you have picked?
Well, with what I know now.
No. At the time,
I was leading Byfield. I thought
that,
and we had Cam Robinson on the show from Elite Prospects, and he sold me on the idea of the down low work that a line of Brady Tkachuk and Quinton Byfield could do, right? 2 6'4", 6'5", imposing figures, great hands in tight. And I didn't give Tim Stutzle enough credit for how driven he is. Like they just put out an article that he did, and I did Control F to search because it was so preeminent in the article. He said winning 12 times in a 6-question article like that. They keep asking him like, hey, you hit 90 points. What's next? He's like, all I want to do is win. And I think that he's really become a leader quickly in Ottawa. I don't know if he would have done it the same way without Brady Tkachuk. I think Brady Tkachuk has really helped Tim Stutzle grow into the player he is. He protects Timmy on the ice. Like there's, especially his rookie year, guys were like taking liberties on him. And Timmy's gotten this reputation mostly because Montreal fans are louder than everyone else as a diver. He's had 2 embellishment calls in his entire career, so I kind of laugh at that. And but him and Brendan Gallagher have gotten into it a lot. And typically Brady will just come in. There's a great capture right after Brady got in a fight protecting Timmy. And Timmy's in the box, or Brady's in the box without any of his upper body equipment on. And Timmy's just doing circles, like looking and laughing at Brady, being like, I didn't realize you were that tough. Like they've got a nice little bromance going on. And I just think coming in at the time he did, where the core was all 1 or 2 years older than him, they were just missing that superstar. And we call him Timmy Superstar with the umlaut over the U in superstar there. And we coined that the day before the draft, just thinking like whoever gets him, man, it's like he's gonna bring asses into seats. Like whereas Quinton Byfield, I think you're looking at like a solid power forward when he's at the peak, but like Stutzle has this just energy about him that is just like he's always go, and it's super impressive. So yeah, I think history, history's 2020, or you can look back like that. Hindsight is the word I was looking for there. And but yeah, all in all, man, like they're both going to be great players, but I don't think anyone in Ottawa is disappointed that it was Tim Stutzle that came to the nation's capital.
Yeah, and at the time, I would have taken Quinton Byfield as well. And I think you have to also factor in where the Kings were, right? At that point, I think a lot of people thought the rebuild was going to take a little bit longer. Things have been accelerated, and some of the moves that have been made have gotten the Kings back into the postseason maybe a little bit quicker, and they're a little bit farther along than we all thought. But we thought Byfield's going to take a few years, and the Kings are going to grow kind of with him along the way. And that now they find themselves here, making the playoffs 2 years in a row. Expectations are raised, and now he's playing, maybe on the top line. And so the expectations are raised there as well. People want to see numbers and things like that, but I still think he can still be an impact player. I don't think he'll ever turn into what Tim Stutzle has turned into, but again, they're also different types of players as well. But I still think I'm still optimistic that Quinton Byfield can be an impactful player for the LA Kings. I did want to ask you though, because I get this occasionally with our fans. We should have drafted Tim Stutzle instead of Quinton Byfield. We should have drafted Trevor Zegras instead of Alex Turcotte, right? I'm like, you can play this game with every draft and every team, Are
you gonna play? Are you gonna play it with me? Do you want to know what it is for me?
Is there one player in fairly recent history that fans or yourself stand out and say, "Oh, we could have had that guy"?
You know what my answer is?
I want to know what your answer is.
Do you have any idea?
I don't.
Because it's a guy who LA ended up getting.
Is it Adrian Kempe?
Oh, it's a little further back.
Okay.
So maybe not recent history, but it's Anze Kopitar.
Oh.
He went 11th overall in 2005. Ottawa had the 9th overall pick. They took a high school defenseman from Minnesota who never developed at all. Brian Lee was the guy's name.
What was his name again?
Brian Lee. He ended up going to North Dakota. He got a cup of coffee, played like 2 years with Tampa, and he was out of the league. But yeah, Brian Lee, 9th overall. That draft was in Ottawa. It was Sidney Crosby draft. And yeah, Ottawa was a great team. Never should have had a top 10 pick, but because of the lockout the year before, it was all done by lottery. So everyone's like, okay, this guy's going to jump on the treadmill going 10 out of 10. Like, we're ready to compete. Let's add a top 10 pick. And then, yeah, we all know what happened. It was Anze Kopitar and Mark Stahl that went right after Brian Lee.
Very good. That's nice. I've learned something today. I like that. We're going to talk about a former Senator who could play a big role for the Kings this season, and a player that was rumored to come LA for a long, long time, and he ended up in Ottawa. We'll do that next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Now, I don't know if you saw yesterday's Locked On NHL podcast, but it was really good. I hear someone went on there and talked about the LA Kings. I don't know who that was, but it was a really excellent episode. So you got to go back and check that out. And make sure you check out Locked On NHL every day, keeping you updated on everything going on in the NHL. Locked On NHL available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. I don't know who that was, but I heard he did a really great job. Ross, we got a couple more minutes with you. Really appreciate your time. This is fun. So I know you're based in Winnipeg. Obviously, you're covering the Senators, but because of that, I do want to ask you, former Winnipeg Jet, Pierre-Luc Dubois, the Kings' big offseason acquisition. Any intel you have on Pierre-Luc Dubois just from being there in Winnipeg, and what do you think the Kings are getting in that guy?
Yeah, for sure. I've probably gotten, 15 live viewings of him over the last 2 years, and heck of a player when he's on his game. And I think he's slotted in perfectly in LA. He's going to be a little more sheltered, if I could speak English. I'm never the biggest Mark Scheifele fan on a good day, whereas obviously Kopitar brings a defensive awareness that Scheifele just doesn't. And I think that Dubois was counted on to do a lot of the heavy lifting, the tough defensive PK minutes in Winnipeg. And I think that might have affected how much offense he was able to produce. I think, man, if he's put in the right spot, I could see him scoring 30 next year. I think that's not out of the realm of possibility. 30 goals, 65 points, that sort of output, I think would be fair to expect. A part of me wonders what Dubois would look like at wing. And I don't know. Of course, when you trade and give up the pieces that LA gave up, you're going to play him at center. But I wonder if over time, if sometime during that 8-year contract, he ends up as a winger. Because I think that he has that kind of prototypical power forward build, but he's a little, I don't want to call him soft. The NHL player, he's tough. But like, he's not going to go in and, push guys around and that sort of thing. For his size, he plays a very well-controlled game, but he uses his body well. So coming off the wall, positioning himself like that. But yeah, heck of a player. I like that trade for both teams, actually. I really like it for Winnipeg too. I think Gabe Vilardi is quite the piece there for Winnipeg, what they need. And I'm interested to see, though. That was one of the biggest pickups of the offseason. And funny enough that you mentioned, and I think it's Jacob Chychrun you want to get into. But Ottawa was long rumored to be the spot for Kevin Fiala. So you guys were able to, snag him first. And he looks like an incredible pickup long-term, right? Like he's kind of gone above and beyond.
Yeah, he definitely lived up to all the hype last season, which is great. And he very rarely played in the top 6. He was on the third line a lot of times, which people may be shocked to find out. But it just seemed like he slotted in really well there for whatever reason. You mentioned it briefly earlier that the Kings and Senators didn't make a trade, but we did kind of swap goalies. Cam Talbot was in Ottawa last year. He's now in Los Angeles, sharing the net with Phoenix Copley, and Jonas Korpisalo, who we picked up at the trade deadline, is now an Ottawa Senator and locked up a pretty good term there in Ottawa. So they feel like he's going to be a goalie they can rely on. I did want to ask you, though, Cam Talbot, his numbers weren't great in Ottawa. Year before, pretty solid in Minnesota. So what can you tell us about Cam Talbot's one season in Ottawa last year?
I can tell you that in December, we had an episode named Re-Sign Talbot, I believe. I'm trying to scroll and see what the exact one was, but it's like why the Ottawa Senators have to bring back Cam Talbot. And then in March, it was how quickly can they get rid of Cam Talbot? It was really, it was should the Ottawa Senators give Cam Talbot a contract extension? And then, a couple weeks later, it's like, nope, we've had enough of him. It was really just consistently inconsistent. When he was on, man, he stole games. If any LA Kings fan wants to really get fired up about this signing, watch the game. It was probably around the time we posted that against the Boston Bruins, the league's best team by far. Ottawa beat them in a shootout, and Cam Talbot, I think he made 11 saves in overtime. It was absolute clinic he put on towards the end of that game. And he can still play. Now, how healthy can he stay? I know LA's got three goalies in the system that it'll kind of be a battle for ice time. All of them kind of making under $2 million, if I'm not mistaken, though.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a situation there where it's like in the right spot, I could see it. Now, Ottawa gave up on a goalie who ended up having a fantastic season. I don't think Philip Gustafson would have put up those numbers in Ottawa, but it just kind of shows, right? Because you mentioned it, Cam Talbot's numbers in Minnesota the year before, very good. So is that more of an indictment on the Senators' defensive system or the goalie within it? Because Anton Forsberg played in front of the same defense and he had better numbers. So I just look at it in terms of when Cam Talbot's good, he's incredible, but there were games where it was blatantly his fault why they lost. Like they missed the playoffs by 6 points. I'd say there were 4 or 5 games that Cam Talbot would like to have had back. So you take the good with the bad, and I don't know what you're going to get, but at 36 years old, I think that Kings fans should be happy that they've got some other options as well if it doesn't work out. But it could at the same time. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's an awful pickup by them, or bet, I guess, is what they're doing on him on a 1-year deal. But yeah, apparently Ottawa offered him a 3-year deal in December, and the number was too low. Talbot's agent, it leaked that he was looking for a $5 million AAV, and it was like, good thing they didn't bite on that one based on how it happened. But as a low cost bite, I don't think it's a bad one at all.
Ross, one more for you. When I took over the Locked On LA Kings show, it was last off season, and there was all this talk about Jacob Chychrun is going to come to LA. The Kings did need a left shot defenseman to fill in a spot on the second pairing, and he seemed like a great fit. And Kings fans had elevated him to this some sort of savior, was going to come in and do all these amazing things. And we talked a lot about, is it going to happen? Well, it ended up not happening, and he is now an Ottawa Senator. Unfortunately, only 12 games last year before he got hurt. But what was the trade or what was the discussion about Jacob Chychrun coming to Ottawa, and your thoughts on him helping your team out this year?
Well, again, what's really cool, and I'm a sucker for a good hometown story, right? He's from Fort Lauderdale. His dad played for the Florida Panthers while he was born, so he grew up there, and I still think he considers that home. I think his mom's from there as well, but his dad and his whole dad side of the family is all from the Ottawa area. So, like the first game he had at home, he scored a goal, and everyone was chanting, "We want playoffs." And then the camera goes, his grandpa's having a Tim Hortons apple fritter. Like, it was just an all-time Canadiana moment. And then like he's brought to near tears after the game when he was shown on the TV, like his grandpa's reaction. So I'm a sucker for those off ice great stories. And I just think Chychrun was kind of the missing piece of what they need. Now, Ottawa has a lot of left shot defensemen, and there was some talk like, hey, who's going to play the right side? That's going to be one of the storylines to watch come training camp. We already know he's going to be paired with Thomas Chabot, who we're expecting to have a big bounce back here. This Jake Sanderson kid, he went 4th overall. Like, we could be talking about LA taking Jake Sanderson at 2 in 2020, and it wouldn't be that far-fetched. This kid is ridiculously talented. Like, I'm trying to think of a comparable that would fit in, like a low maintenance type player, just so much fun to watch. But Chychrun is hopefully going to be that same type. Now, the problem with him and being in the Western Conference, maybe not the same division anymore with Phoenix, you might not see it as often, but like he's got injury problems, right? Like, he hasn't played a full season outside of the 56 game season, but then when he did, he led all defensemen in the NHL in goals. So it's like when he's in the lineup, he's a top 4 defenseman, and I think Ottawa's really lucky to have him. But man, they need to bank on his health being good, because man, if it's not, you give up a first and 2 seconds to get him, including the 12th overall pick in the draft. It's a hefty price to pay, but the 2 years left, right? He had 3 years last year when they traded for him, was able to get it with that term at $4.6 million. Like, again, a low cost bet in terms of how much cost he's going to have on your cap over the next couple of years. So Sens fans are super excited and hoping that he's kind of the missing piece here. Him and Joonas Korpisalo as well, who I kind of want to throw back and ask you, like, what should Sens fans be expecting out of Joonas Korpisalo from what you saw during his brief stint there?
Yeah, I mean, very steady guy who's, if he sees it, he's going to stop it. Maybe a little bit underrated athletically. It was interesting, with the situation in Columbus and the money that they had paid Elvis Merzlikins there. They felt like they had to, I guess, play him, but it seemed like Korpisalo was probably the better option in net. But we would have been pretty happy with re-signing him, but I think he just wanted obviously a little bit more, and the Kings were looking to spend outside of the net and build around a goaltender rather than bring in kind of a higher price netminder. We'll see if that works out for the Kings or not. But that was kind of the strategy they went with. But I think we were pretty happy with Jonas Korpisalo. And if they had decided to re-sign him, I think a lot of Kings fans would have been pretty satisfied with that.
Because look at it, like the Edmonton series, those last 3 games, you think that was more on the team as a whole than him? And I mean, you're going up against the best of the best.
Yeah, I would say more. I mean, it was hard to criticize the Kings a lot because that penalty, that power play was just, what do you do against that? I know the Kings penalty kill hasn't been very good. And that's a big storyline going into this year because they've made it a priority. They're going to get it straightened out. We'll see. But Leon Draisaitl was just a beast in that series, just an absolute beast. And Connor McDavid was, well, yeah, I mean, still pretty good, but
Connor McDavid. Yeah,
not bad. Hey, Ross, great to have you on, man. It was awesome. Really enjoyed the conversation. I would love to do it again sometime. And you can follow Ross, by the way, on Twitter at Ross Levitan, Levitan. Also, Locked On Senators is at Sens Central. Continue success, Ross, with the show, man. Great job with the Locked On Senators.
I appreciate it. And they've spread out the 2 meetings this year. LA's in Ottawa November 2nd. So maybe we'll have to do something around that time. And then we'll have to wait until March. But I'm just glad you guys got rid of Brendan Lemieux because I have this actually on my soundboard. So if you have a second here, I'll play it for your audience. Maybe they don't remember the biting.
We remember. We remember.
This is Brady Tkachuk after the game.
I don't even know what he's thinking. He's just a complete brickhead. He's got nothing up there. Bad guy, bad player, but what a joke he is.
All-time soundbite right there from Brady Tkachuk.
Well, all right. I said, I don't condone biting. But if you're going to bite, you might want to bite a Tkachuk, right? No, I mean, if you're going to bite.
What's Brady ever done? Come on.
You're right. He's a little bit guilty by association. Look,
I saw a great clip though, and I know Doughty and Matthew Tkachuk.
Yes.
Yes. But there was a great clip that went out of Keith Tkachuk and Claude Lemieux fighting way back in the 1996 World Cup of Hockey. So there's something that the listeners out there can go check out because it is awesome content. They are swinging them, wearing the international jerseys. It just looks great. So It's a generational hatred between those 2 families. It's kind of cool. I love that, man. The game within the game.
Yeah, I was at a game before they traded Brendan Lemieux and Claude was sitting behind me and I felt I was sweating the whole time.
Yeah. Hey, well, that's his favorite place to hit people. Right? So there's that. Hey,
yeah, it might be that
question. I know we're going long here, but Zach McEwen also coming over. He had a cup of coffee in LA. Like, does he have any tangible skill, or you think he's just going to be a face puncher? Because Ottawa Senators fans, they were upset. They got a 3-year contract, but literally at league minimum. So I'm on the side of being like, hey, you need to have a bit of grittiness in your lineup. I don't really care who it is, as long as they can protect your teammates. And if you're paying them league minimum, I don't care whether it's 1, 2, or 3 years when you're 26 years old. But what was your impression on his half a season?
Well, it wasn't really fair because he came over to Philly. He had just gotten his face broken in a fight, and it seemed like he wasn't really ready to get back into it. You know what I mean? And the thing that was what was frustrating with him is he in his first shift in the first period, he come out and hit somebody, and then he never did it again for the rest of the game. It's like, why don't you do that the whole game? I don't understand why you just do it in the first period and then you just kind of fade away. So if somebody could tell him, hey, it's still the first period, every period, maybe that would help out. I don't know, but
nice. Awesome. I'm sure the Sens fan listeners here will enjoy that. And I appreciate the kind words too, Eddie. Really, we are just trying to all lift the tide here and make Locked On the go-to place when people want, local experts on the biggest stories. And obviously we're a passion-based network more than anything. And I get the sense of that from you. And that's clearly what we try to get through on Locked On Senators. So I always say it's fun when fans of the other team come in the comments during, when our teams play against each other, and whether it's a positive or an argumentative comment, I love it. So yeah, let's plan for something around November 2nd, whether we do a pregame or postgame. And yeah, I'd love to have you on with Pilsy as well on our show. So continued success for you guys as well. And I always have a soft spot for LA, so I will be watching you guys quite a bit this season.
All right. Sounds good. Really appreciate it, Ross. And like I said, continued success. Really appreciate this. Looking forward to the next time. Take care.
All the best.
All right, guys. That was Ross Levitan. Hope you enjoyed that. We're going to have another special interview coming up on tomorrow's show, a rival report as Jess Belmosto, the host of Locked On Flames, is going to check in, tell us all about the Calgary Flames, and get her thoughts as well on our LA Kings. Hey, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. If you want to give us any feedback, the email address lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. Always want to follow us on social media if you could, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On LA Kings as well. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening, watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.